absence. I do take it that Councillor Yacob is coming, but we'll wait and see, but we will carry on to start with. So, have I got any declarations of interest in lobbying? Yes,
Thank you. It's on the supplementary agenda. I'm assuming the PAS review took some time, so on 2023-2024, I was the Vice Chairman of Planning and interviewed with PAS.
Thank you for declaring that interest. I think you can still be on the committee, but thank you.
thank you. That I don't think that would be a problem.
Thank you, Chair. As Councillor Myers has done that, I should say that as Vice Chair in 2024-25, I also interviewed with PAS.
Thank you. So we've got two lobbying, right? We will go on to confirmations of the minutes of the Planning Committee held on Wednesday the 30th of April. I think everybody that's here tonight was here. Councillor Yacob wouldn't have been here because she wasn't on the committee then. But all those in favour are happy with it. Thank you very much. Thank you. We go straight on to item 4. Which I think it is View Cinemas, which is you, Ellie. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. So this application is a variation of condition 12 relating to operating hours to extend the daily open hours of View Cinema from 9 AM to 1 AM to 8 AM till 3 AM. These extended opening hours are requested to allow more flexibility, to allow film premieres to be shown as and when they're released, to allow customers to avoid busy periods, and also to better reflect View's business model. So the application site is located along East Walk, which runs through Basildon Town Centre. East Square is located to the west of the site, which situates the Grade 2 listed building, Brook House. Eastgate Shopping Centre is also located to the south of the site, and Town Square is located to the west. And the site is outlined in blue on the photo in the presentation. So again, the proposal is to vary the condition relating to opening hours. The current condition outlines a 9 AM till 1 AM opening time, and this also gave some opening time flexibility to 3 AM on no more than 10 occasions each calendar year on this condition. So this the cinema should operate in line with this current planning condition, and that's why that's hoping to vary this today. And this 10-day period was put in place to follow if there was successful late night events, and then there was the opportunity to submit to vary condition 12 in the future, which is what is happening now. And the reason for this approach was to protect the amenities of the Brook House residents. View has now been operating for just under a year, and as confirmed via email and via planning statement, they have opened beyond 1 AM on one weekend in October 2024, and this was a Friday and a Saturday night, and there was no complaints made from these two occasions. In terms of consultations, the full response from Environmental Health can be seen within my officer report. They have raised no objections in terms of noise and disturbance to the surrounding neighbouring residents, and they also agreed with the inclusion of an additional condition regarding compliance to a management and dispersal strategy, which is outlined at the end of the report. In terms of residents, we consulted with 151 surrounding neighbouring occupiers on the 2nd of April, and there was also 2 site notices placed on the 2nd of April, and no responses was received from either of them consultations. So the building seen in that photo there, and that's where the authorised planning permission was for this 5-storey building and the cinema. The application site is identified as being within Basildon Town Centre on the proposals map, Policy BAS TC1 in the Save Local Plan states that within town centres, as identified on the proposals map, development appropriate to a town centre, including retailing, offices, etc., should be encouraged, and the continued cinema use with these varied hours within this application is considered to be an appropriate use within the town centre. The use of the application site as a cinema with the extended opening hours supports the regeneration of Basildon Town Centre in providing a viable commercial use, which will provide an active street frontage and encourage the viability of the town square. The occupation of the cinema falls within the authorised use of this application site. However, the extended hours of operation do require planning consent, and they're assessed against the material considerations outlined within my report. The most important consideration in this instance is the impact on neighbouring amenities. So, as seen on the location plan, the closest neighbouring occupiers to the application site are the residential occupiers at Brook House, and they're set away approximately 30 metres from the site. So a noise assessment was submitted with the application, commissioned by SUNO. That's dated the 19th of March, 2025, and that has been submitted to support the extending of these opening hours. And these noise surveys, the details of this can be indicated in my report, which outline the dates and the specific type of noise activity that was assessed. In this noise impact assessment specifically, Brook House have been considered as part of the methodology, and it has been done under a worst case scenario, which includes an open window assessment. So the extension of these closing times from 1 a.m. to 3 a.m. was the main focus of this assessment, and this is deemed to be the worst case scenario in terms of the potential noise impacts, as activity is obviously lower during this time. The assessment determines that such an extension will not give rise to material noise impacts during these times, and it has also been concluded that the proposed earlier opening time from to 8 a.m. instead of 9 a.m. would also not give rise to any material noise impacts. So the submitted noise assessment has been provided using data from existing view venues of the same opening hours, and this data has shown late night screenings, which is there was 45 nights at Islington from the July 2024 to September 2024, and there was an average of 3 show-ins between 1 a.m. and 3 a.m. And on 42 of these nights, also at Bromley, there was an average of 2 show-ins in the same period. However, there was only an attendance of 21 patrons. It's not obviously possible to confirm if whether all these patrons stayed to the conclusion of each screening. However, for the purposes of the assessment, it's assumed that they would have to get an average idea of the amount of patrons for these kinds of screenings. Whilst it's acknowledged that the average attendees beyond 1 a.m, as indicated within the assessment, are due to be well below capacity, there is obviously some potential for some films to draw larger patron numbers. However, it is outlined that this is not considered to occur on such a regular basis as daily cinema showings now. And that's also outlined within the comparable venues in other view venues across. And following on from that, in terms of the dispersal management plan and strategy, that is appended in the noise assessment. In my report, there is detailed bullet points of the key features of this management plan, which are ultimately put to ensure that everyone leaving the cinema, it reduces the amount of noise. Things like notices, the partnership with the car park, being free after certain hours to encourage people to walk that direction rather than past the residents. Things like staggered start times, the retail outlets closing, the commencement of films, ensuring that this happens at different times. And we have also included, as part of this application, the inclusion of a point of contact in the event that any complaints are raised from these extended hours, and that is the duty manager of view, who's outlined in the document as the point of contact. As outlined before, Basildon Council's Environmental Health Service have reviewed the submitted noise assessment, and they have no objections to the proposal, with their full response set out in section 3. Therefore, in light of the noise impact assessment findings, the details that are outlined in the dispersal and management plan strategy, and the consultation response for environmental health, the proposed extended opening hours are not considered to cause detrimental harm in regards to noise and disturbance to the surrounding neighbouring occupiers. In respect of highways issues, there is no concerns with this for the varied hours. In respect of B&G, again, there's no concerns with this as it falls below the threshold for B&G. and therefore to conclude the proposed extending opening hours to View Cinema to 8 a.m. to 3 a.m. are not considered to cause detrimental harm to the residential amenities of the surrounding neighbouring occupiers in respect of noise and disturbance, subject to the inclusion of the amended condition 12 below, and also the inclusion of condition 27, which ensures compliance with the noise management policy. The development is also considered to enhance and expand a town centre use, and in its employment will support the vitality and viability of Basildon Town Centre, and therefore the application is being recommended for approval, subject to them two conditions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ellie. Have anybody got any points of clarification? Yes?
So I'm just looking through. Thank you for that. I just wanted to check, has there been any consideration for security or safety of people coming out at 3 o'clock in the morning?
Yes, so we consulted with Basildon Council's CCTV and Safety Manager, and he raised no objections to the proposal. So that's just outlined in section 3 of the report under the consultations.
Thanks,
Thank
Chair.
you.
So, Ellie, if we were to approve this and the noise was to turn out to be an issue, what could be done?
So obviously the consideration is that from the evidence led approach that we've had, that it shouldn't be an issue. Obviously, in terms of complaints, we've now included a point of contact within the dispersal and management strategy, which complaints should go to. However, it's important to note that within the environmental health response, we do not have a sort of statutory duty to take any statutory provisions outside of the cinema, because it's outside of the cinema. So obviously we could not account for people making noise in the public area. So environmental health could only do it if it was in the venue, so not leaving the venue. So ultimately there is a person of contact that we've now asked the applicants to add into the management strategy to ensure that if there are complaints, there is someone to go to because of the approach of environmental health. But ultimately, from the noise impact assessment, environmental health consultation response and the assessment, we don't envision that there is any harm to the residential occupiers. I hope that answers the question. Sorry, that's a bit...
Any other? No? Alex? No? Okay. I have a speaker, but Kate Turvey, but it doesn't seem like she's here, unless
She's remote.
oh,
I'm
she's
here.
remote. Okay, thank you.
Sorry, Alexa going.
997 combo.
No, I don't think we can actually see you. It's like mist.
As film times get longer and longer, and the demand to show film premieres continues. These hours will match the hours on View's licence, as well as the planning hours of Cineworld at Festival Way. An additional hour in the morning will also allow the cinema to show films to families and other groups during quieter periods. As you've heard, a detailed noise assessment was submitted with the application, containing both on-site data and data from other View cinemas of a similar size and location, demonstrating there won't be any harmful impacts on residential amenity from the proposed hours extension. A comprehensive noise management plan is also already in place. As you've heard, the Council's EHO has raised no objection to the proposal, subject to a condition requiring compliance with the management plan, which View themselves proposed. The hours extension will help meet demand and will be a further positive boost for the East Square area, Basildon's nightlife, and the vitality and viability of the town centre, whilst ensuring residential amenity is protected. We hope members agree and are able to support our application tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Katie. Now, I think we'll go on to any more questions. The officers or anything. Everybody happy? So we can go straight into the vote, can we? Are we all happy? Yes? Okay. Go straight into the recommendation that the planning application number 2500323 VAR be granted conditional planning permission. All those in favour, please show. I think that's unanimous. Thank you. We have an extra supplement on our planning application tonight for the planning committee, and I will pass that over to Charles. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Larkin. So firstly, apologies to members for the lateness of the item. Ellie, can we show the presentation, please? Thank you. Thank you. The scheme of delegation sets out the Council's decision-making processes, identifying which applications are determined under delegated powers and which applications are determined by the Planning Committee. The first slide that comes up shows the current scheme of delegation. It's recommended that councils keep their schemes of delegation under review. Basildon's last review was undertaken in November 2020. A review was undertaken which identified there are a number of straightforward, policy compliant and uncontentious major planning applications being referred to Planning Committee for decision. The current scheme of delegation has therefore been reviewed and a number of amendments are proposed, particularly around major planning applications. And just for clarity, a major planning application is typically defined as a proposal for 10 or more residential units, new commercial floor space of 1,000 square metres or more, or developments on sites of a certain size, so 0.5 hectares or more for residential and 1 hectare or more for other uses. A review of recent Planning Committee items has identified 6 major applications from the end of 2024 to date which were heard at Planning Committee but were uncontroversial and policy compliant. The amended scheme of delegation, if I could bring that up please, Ellie, seeks to remove these types of applications away from Planning Committee. Page 5 of the supplementary agenda shows the types of applications in question. Members will note that large-scale major residential and residential-led mixed-use planning applications, including any related Section 73 applications, will still be determined by Planning Committee, as they typically comprise the most contentious and most complex planning applications the service deals with and clearly have the greatest impact on the borough. These are exactly the types of application Planning Committee should be focused on. The final change is a revision to the call-in process to make clear that a call-in relates to a single planning application and that any future planning applications on the same site will revert back to the normal scheme of delegation unless a further call-in is submitted and agreed with the Chair of Planning Committee and the Assistant Director. The most recent example that members may be familiar with of a twice returning application was for single-storey extensions to a dental and cosmetic practice called FaceMed in Crays Hill. I'm happy to take any questions or comments on the amended scheme of delegation. Following this meeting, the proposed amendments, together with any comments from Planning Committee members, will be taken to full council for decision. Thank you.
Thank you, Charles. Has anybody got any questions? I'll start with you, Alex.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Charles, for that brief introduction. On the non-major, non-residential development minor, so 1, 2, 3, so it's the new one ability, so 1, 2, 3, third one down with the new proposals, non-major, non-residential development minor planning applications, including, I just wonder how safe we are in terms of doing those under delegated authority with yourself and the Chair when it does concern things on Basildon Borough Council and SEMPRA.
Thank you, Councillor Myers. Yeah, so we have consulted with legal colleagues on this and they're happy that change would be acceptable. Also, just to point out that they would go on to our what we call our Category 1 list, so there would still be the ability for members to call in an application if they wish to do so. Thank you.
I'm going through the list, sorry. Fine. Most of it is fairly self-explanatory. We're looking at sort of conditions and things like that. But if I go to, obviously, Planning Committee is going to be deciding major energy infrastructure, renewable energy projects, 1 hectare or more to the Planning Committee. But yet, if there's any changes to conditions, that will be done on delegated authority. But I always assumed that if a decision was made by planning committee, you'd have to come back to planning committee to decide if they wanted to change things, as has always been done in the past, and why it's different now. Because sometimes these can be contentious with some condition changes. So this is the 4th one from the bottom. So they can be quite contentious if they want to change their conditions on how they operate.
Yeah, Councillor Myers, I understand your point. Yeah, so I mean, this we wrote this in because there was a recent example of an item that went to planning committee for relatively minor amendments to a substation at the Crays Hall solar farm, which was relatively straightforward. The principle had already been dealt with at planning appeal, so it was a relatively kind of light application in that respect. So that's the reasoning behind it, is that generally speaking, the changes that are sought don't really go to the heart of the permission. They're normally quite kind of modest changes, but again, they would sit on the Cat 1 list. So if a member was concerned, they would again have the ability to call that item to committee. Thank you.
Thank you, Charles. Next one, major non-residential development where the site area is 1 hectare or more. Obviously, these are eligible for calling, as you say, but obviously, if it does, they're building a building on perhaps on Greenbelt, non-residential, but the area is, 10 hectares. Smack bang in the middle where it does have an interest in the countryside, etc. Just wondering why those sorts of developments, because obviously I know exactly what floor space is, depends on the building, but of course if you're going to start doing things like car parking, that's not counted as floor space, it's not a building. So just wondering why that is under delegated authority and should and perhaps some should be under delegated authority and some shouldn't, and that should be a decision for the planning officers to take to bring it to committee. For example, if you're going to build a small building, but yet going to have concrete car parking everywhere over a site that's larger than 1 hectare, then I think that's something that we should be considering to be amended as well.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Myers. So the rationale behind that one was we see a lot of applications, in particular for schools. So kind of new fencing, small, relatively speaking, modest extensions to schools, minor car parking tweaks, where the red line is drawn around the site area. So that triggers it being kind of a major development. Obviously, we normally have our floor, as you said, we've got our floor space categories for majors as well, which is over 1,000 square metres. But this is typically to pick up kind of the school type extensions and small extensions to Ford, for example, where there are extensions and maybe car parking alterations or some other changes to the wider site. But again, as you've noticed, that would be on the Cat 1 list, so had the ability for members to call it in. Thank you.
Okay, but do you accept that other than those which are doing a fence at a school, or say for example Ford's putting a new substation across the whole site, there is scope here where perhaps there is a little bit of tweaking perhaps that could be done, where you've got major non-residential developments which could consider to be falling outside the floor space, but could be quite large on that part of a non-residential area. Below the threshold of 2,500 square metres, but the site area is more than 1 hectare, that could then be considered not to be or to be a major thing that we should be considering rather than a fence or a small substation. Do you get my point, Charles?
Yeah, I do. Yeah, I mean the other Councillor Myers, the other example we gave there was the Basildon Sporting Village, where we had an application for paddle courts as well. So as I say, I'm happy to have another look at it. I think the safety net for you is the call-in. The ability to call that in if it's generating such interest or there's significant member concern, then that's the ultimate safety net, that you can request call-in of the application. Thank you.
So going back to the first one, a non-major non-residential development, and I know Ellie's here. Gave a very good report this evening. Talking about minor applications which may consider Basildon Borough Council and Central Land, or minor non-residential applications in the first instance. We here on Planning Committee have been here, well I've been here for 3 years, Kevin's been here on planning for some time, and it has been a useful opportunity for, and Chair of course, and Councillor Harrison, it has been a useful opportunity for young planners to bring forward reports to get you know, rather than writing reports, but having to present and part of their training going forward. So I just wondered if that's been considered going forwards when all of it is under Cat 1s. Because it is, I think it has been quite helpful for Ellie and maybe for Eunice as well when presenting reports for the first time. It can be a bit nervous in front of all us scary people asking all the questions. But sometimes it can be, you know, that's the way to get started in presenting to us and preparing themselves for later jobs with larger applications going forwards. So I just wonder if there's been any thought about that at all.
Yes, a good question, Councillor Myers. I think obviously we can do training with the staff about presentation styles and things like that. I think ultimately it's about kind of making sure that planning committee are being freed up so that they can kind of deal with the biggest and most kind of controversial applications. So it's primarily about kind of giving planning committee more space to deal with the big items. But I do take your point. But I think there's some training that we could do. We could get the junior planners to attend planning committees as well and maybe present elements of a proposal. Thank you.
Kevin?
Cheers. On that last point, I think every application is major if you're that person to go live in next door to it or something like that. So I think so every application is major, just because it's not over 10 houses or etc. You know, it doesn't mean to say it's not major. Don't argue with hardly anything, and all honesty. Other than the points that Alex made, and one of them he said about plan application comes in, we agree, and then let's let officers make that modest, your words, change. But we had one the other week that came in. It was a modest change. It was 75% increase in the size of the initial building. So who defines what modest is? Do you remember? I remember it being presented to us, and we had the argument it was a minor change. Well, no, it wasn't. It was 75% bigger than what the initial one was, and we had that quite a heated debate, if I remember rightly. So who decides what modest is, and who, you know, I mean that would be a committee that would, in my opinion, a committee would be a better place to decide that overall, possibly knowing the area, listening to the residents, than an officer to decide, or what is a definition of modest, full stop. It's open to, we want open and transparency. You know, you could have one officer say, well, I think this is modest, and then another one say, well, no, this is modest. But if you've got a committee, you've got more of a chance of getting a transparent view on it, you know, a more rounded view on it. That's no disrespect to officers whatsoever. What it means is, you know, it's an opinion on that day that officer makes, whereas if it comes forward to committee, you've got a lot more opinions to make a judgment on it.
And that's a Crazel Farm one.
Can I just interject on that? Part of the delegated list that comes in, Alex and I look at it, and I do question quite a few things on it, and the officers come back to me. If I think things like you've said, any bits and pieces that might be modest, I think that's not, I do speak to the officers about it. So it's just not forgotten. Okay? Sorry.
No, that's absolutely fine, mate. If there's a case of you make the final decision on what's modest, then that, irrespective of who that person is, it's consistent. That's my point. If you have one officer making it and another officer making it, it's not necessarily consistent. But if they come to you and say, well, I think this is, and you as the chairman say no or yes, then I think that's consistent. So I think that answers the question. So yeah, thank you.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, just a quick one from me. I noticed that a number of these amendments have a threshold of 2,500 square metres, so like 50 metres by 50 metres, you know, in terms of approximate dimensions. Charles, can you just talk us through why that's an appropriate threshold, please?
Yes, Councillor Baker. So actually, when we looked back at a very old scheme of delegation, the threshold was actually 10,000 square metres, which was very high, and we brought that right down to 1,000 square metres, which was our definition of a major development. But we've looked at, you know, a number of kind of relatively speaking modest extensions to industrial premises that were kind of tipping around 1,000, 1,500 square metres, and they were kind of just extensions to existing premises. So they were in allocated employment areas. They didn't raise any significant planning policy issues. They were relatively straightforward in that respect. So that's why we've gone for kind of a 2,500 square metre threshold to try and capture those kind of smaller developments, as it were. But so that's kind of the rationale behind that.
Any more? No? Mark? No? Alex? No?
Sorry, I've got one.
Oh, you have? Okay.
Yeah, it's only just come to me, so I'm just thinking about, so when people put in an application, part of that application is that it's going to come to this committee, to this meeting. Would it take away an element of the importance of that application by the fact that it's not coming to a meeting, which would make maybe more people apply for something that they wouldn't do had they thought that it would come in front of a committee? Does that make sense? Would it encourage more applications of a certain type?
Yeah, that's a good question. I haven't thought about that. I wouldn't have thought so. No, I mean obviously whether an item comes to planning committee or is delegated for decision, it's still done in terms of the same kind of considerations. So we still look at our local plan, we still look at our MPPF, and we still look at any other material considerations. So I don't think the fact that an application might be delegated as opposed to going to planning committee would or should encourage kind of poor development, if that was the concern. We would assess as members would do in accordance with the development plan.
Actually, Mark, on the delegated list, there is full reports on, and I do read them. So if there's a problem, I then come back to the officers. I then ask the officers what it is that I have a problem with, that they answer me. So if I'm not happy, you know, I then pass it on. So is that okay?
Sorry, if I can add.
Yeah.
So no, all I was thinking was more along the lines of whoever's putting the application on, they know that it's going to be currently a planning committee that will be televised. Everyone can watch it, everyone can see what questions have been asked. Whereas if it's being delegated, that's not being aired in public. So therefore, to a certain extent, it might make it easier to put that application in. That's what I was thinking.
Yep. Yes, but what we're trying to do is trying to speed things up.
Yeah.
So, and obviously some of the things, people actually complain and say, why can't that be delegated? Why has it got to go to planning? Because when we have a major big planning application that comes in front of us, usually it lasts a very long time, and some of these things get pushed to the back, and then people have, even on the planning committee, have lost a bit of interest in. So that can be a problem also. So, you know, please do trust my judgment on it, okay? Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, just to come back and reiterate that, so as Vice Chairman, myself and Carol at the time both went through the CAT ones, and obviously if we had any points, we emailed Charles about them, or Adele at the time, to go through them. Just a point on the miners, obviously for the ability to be called in, but for on behalf of Basildon Council and SEMPRA, is it a chance that members of this planning committee can see that legal advice, please? Just to double check.
Charles?
Just for our. Sorry, Michelle. Yeah.
I've actually checked legislation. So, I mean, if you want me to go through the kind of chapter and verse, I can. It's not as scary as it sounds. I can summarise it in a few lines. So, historically speaking, back in 1968, there was a Town and Country Planning Act, and there was actually a particular provision that allowed for the council to delegate its own planning applications to be dealt with under delegated authority. As you know, the main provision we now use is the Town and Country Plan Act 1990. So what I then found is that provision of the 1968 Act wasn't actually followed through to the 1990 Act, which would give an inference that perhaps, you know, our own planning application should be treated differently. However, when I then looked into the Local Government Act 1972, you might be familiar with the provision of Section 101, which does allow for the council to delegate its own functions within its own system. So therefore, that would allow for the council's own planning applications to be dealt with under delegated authority. I've looked into case law and I couldn't find anything to this point. Unfortunately, I did do an extensive search, and that was the closest thing I could find. That actually the reason why the 1968 provision perhaps had not been followed through into the 1990 provision was because it was dealt with under the 1972 Act of Local Government provisions. So I hope that answers your question and gives you some comfort in terms of why the proposed scheme of delegation can be dealt with as we're proposing.
Thanks, Michelle. It does with your first point, but it doesn't with the second point. Sort of make me comfortable, because as you said, that you can't find any case law around sort of delegated authority planning applications that Basildon or in our case Sempra are putting forward for non-residential sites. So
I did consider this point in my advice as well, and I think the risk of challenge would probably lie within the applications where perhaps there were a number of objections that were raised. And I would have thought that given the types of applications that are being proposed to be under the category 1 section would mean that if there was an application that came forward and there was a number of objections, that actually in consultation with the lead member and chair, they would pick up that actually there's quite a few objections here, this one should go before the committee. So that would be the sort of fallback position that should give everyone comfort that the appropriate applications would then come before the committee at the appropriate time. But for example, I think we've had a number of Sempra schemes that have come forward where actually there's been no one in the public gallery, there's been no objections, and it's come before committee and actually it's just gone through. That is true, because Sempra is obviously residential operating company.
Are you happy with that, Councillor Myers? Alex?
yeah, okay. So obviously, the separate ones would come for housing. Obviously, come here because it's residential, and we talk about non-residential with Basildon Council and Sempra. I know it's obviously eligible for calling it, but I still think there is a risk here of Basildon Borough Council and Sempra, just really unneeded to be put in under delegated authority. I mean, you're saying you can't find any case law when you're looking at the different acts and trying to, but basically it's like a bellwether. Because if someone does challenge it, then you could open yourself up to all kinds of issues if someone decided to, say, is this delegated authority legal? They could, JR it and ask if it is or so. So just interested in that thought of, or whether or not it's a risk that's worth taking at this stage.
And I gave my advice. Obviously, I always consider that point. What's the risk to the challenge, to the council? What would the cost implications be? And I do think that in this particular instance, it would be very minimal. I mean, there is always that possibility that a challenge could be raised, but I feel fairly confident we would be able to tackle any such challenge with the defence of we're doing the delegation using our powers under Section 101 of the Local Government Act 1972.
Thank you, Adele. Anybody, any other questions? Right. Anything else before we go into the recommendations? No? No. Right. That planning committee note and endorse the amendments to the scheme of the delegation as set out in the report and enclosure 1. 2. Agrees that the revised scheme of delegation be referred to full council for approval. Can I say all those that are in agreement, can you show? Thank you, everybody. And I'd just like to thank the officers, including Charles, for all their hard work they've done on this, because it has been a bit of an uphill struggle to get it all done for the planning committee. Thank you, everybody, and safe journey home.